actually, right before we watch this clip, maybe I should just share some more information. So just China, and so Richard Wolff is kind of making the point. He's talking about China's trajectory and its economy over the past 40, 50 years, which I'm going to get into more. And at the end of the video, he really does this really good job, I find, to like debunking or addressing all these kind of anti-China talking points. So let's watch that and come back to it.
And I want to comment on the bizarre hot button issues to show you that they are about the Cold War. They're not really much about anything else. Hong Kong. Hong Kong is not free. Hong Kong is controlled by the central government. That's correct. But let's please remember what Hong Kong was before. It was controlled by a government much further away than Beijing, a government in London. It was a British colony, and it never had independence from Britain for the 99-year lease that China gave to the British, which ended at the end of the last century. And if you wanted an example of what Hong Kong is like, the example might be Puerto Rico, which now has a government that's elected, yeah, but it can't do anything without the approval of a congressional committee that has absolutely nothing to do with Puerto Rico, but has the real power. To make a big deal of Hong Kong and to forget Puerto Rico, this is a strange kind of argument, you know. Then there's the Uyghurs, a Muslim minority in one corner of China. I have no idea of how they're being treated. Some of the evidence looks like it's not so good. But for a country like ours that has just finished 20 years of continuous warfare, destroying two Muslim countries at least, Iraq and Afghanistan, not to speak of Syria, Libya, and so on, this is a strange argument to be having breast-beating considerations for the Uyghurs. South China Sea, the name tells it all. It's their area, not ours. There's no Chinese Navy in the Gulf of Mexico, is there? And then the unfair practices. Oh, my goodness. The Chinese gave the American companies a deal. You want to come here, you get cheap labor, you get a growing market. And we, in turn, get your technology. You don't want the deal? Don't come. You want the deal? Okay, that's the price. Calling that intellectual property theft after the fact, that's kind of dirty pool.
Okay, Sam, I don't know what you make of it, and then I'm going to talk about what was his general position before getting into that, but he really dismantled some of those arguments in a really good way. And I kind of love the honesty that he had about the Uyghurs, because he's like, I don't know what's going on with the Uyghurs. I've heard there might have been some bad treatments here or there, but what the hell does that have to do with with anything? And why are you so concerned after you've destroyed all these countries? It was like the most honest, best take on the issue. I loved it.
I mean, I was surprised you used the word debunking, because I think it was just a sober analysis. Yeah. That's why I very much like Mr. Wolff for, you know, these type of analysts, because whatever you agree or you disagree, okay, this is what I know, this is what I don't know, this is my take, this is your take. I would say the you know, liberal anti, you know, dictatorship, blah blah blah, they would say we oppose the Iraq war too, but nobody, we are the opposition in the country, you know. So but I mean, the record of, I mean, depends on who, like Washington Post, no, but some others, yes. So, you know, that would be their defense. But yeah, I think, again, it's at the, when he talks about China, he talks like an adult. He doesn't talk like a child who has this like notions of, oh, why isn't there freedom? Why isn't everybody nice to each other? Why doesn't life like, because we are not five, and because the world is not evenly you know, spread and all that, and you know, just get over yourself. So
100%. And so I mean, you saw him just address all these one by one, Hong Kong, all of them. And but in the video, the main argument that he was making, he was kind of trying to, this time, I guess, debunk. I think I'm using the word appropriately here. He tried to debunk the fact that China's growth had to do because they switched to private capitalism. So he kind of traces it from the 50s. He said they had enormous growth until the 70s, when they did become more privatized, a bit more liberalized, you can say, their economy. And then the annual growth, he does admit, went up a little bit. But then he points out that in the past 10, 15 years, when they've gone even more towards the more neoliberalism and more private owned, it has actually, the annual growth has dropped a little bit. And his whole point is that these are all just different kind of capitalism, and China has done different kind of capitalism this whole time. And then to show that he's not just saying do the China thing 100%, is just saying there are good things to learn from here, and in fact they're not doing what I want. What I want are worker co-ops. I think everybody's heard him talk about that all the time, and he says there are no worker co-ops in China anyway.
Yeah, I found his end of his analysis very sobering, very accurate, very good. I would say that with the shift that happened with China, with opening up to capital and moving towards a slight privatization or a state-controlled privatization. First of all, it was a move towards a more Japanese-style economy, as in a planned economy, not towards a free market liberal economy like US or UK. Second of all, I would say that's okay. They may have had less annual growth after that, but they wouldn't even had that without, this, maybe I diverge from Mr. Wolff in that I do think foreign investment and foreign technology had a huge role to play. Of course, self-sufficiency, all of that is very important. But when you do, like it's in case of Iran, I'm sorry, but a lot of leftists and Iranian nationalists are always complaining about foreign influence or foreign contracts in Iran. I'm sorry, but if you don't have the expertise, or if you don't have the finance, or if you don't have the ability, as in like educated, like for example, a population or whatever, you have to, for a continuous growth, if that's the goal or whatever, you have to make concessions, and you have to allow other countries to come in. Like I've always said this, Iranian people talk about Iranian oil as if they killed the dinosaurs and buried them there waiting for them to turn to oil. I'm sorry, but you happen to born on oil, and you didn't have drills. I'm sorry, British had drills. What do you want to do? Do you want them to give you drills for free? They're not going to do it. You know what I mean? So you do, and China did that, I think, played that game very well, although they could have protected their workforce better and not allowed their workforce to be abused as much as it was by international and Chinese corporations. I completely find that disgusting. But, but that opening up, I think, was a part of a necessary process. And you can't say just that because the annual growth was less, it wasn't a positive step.
Yeah, and I don't think Richard Wolff would deny that too much. I kind of just paraphrase what he said, because he himself, in the clip that we played where he's debunking, he talks about how, because the Americans also complain about, not copyright, what's the word?
IP infringement.
Copyright, intellectual property and stuff. He's like, listen, that's the deal that the Chinese had made. They say you can come here, build your stuff, and increase your profits, which you all ran and did in the 80s and 90s, and we will get the technology in return.
And surprisingly, Chinese were open about it. If I was a world leader, and in most cases of other countries, they do that, they just don't tell you.
Yeah.
They're like, of course, what do you think we allow you to, like, what do you think is the point of this? Do you think, I don't understand, what do people think other people operate based on? Interest? Or some fucking Dr. Zeus, like, ideals? Yeah.
A lot of people think that it's fine that they operate based on interest and exceptionalism, but no, the other can't do that. Only me.
No, they're frauds, aren't they?
Yeah. And one thing I would add with China, though, is just that the Chinese government seems to be like so reactive that anytime you're talking about, you really need to make sure like you're talking about the past 2 to 3 years and you're not talking about the past 10 years, because even the past 2 to 3 years, apparently there have been some shifts again more towards state involvement, and you can just see how quickly they change things. Bitcoin, they were like, yeah, fine, come here, mining, blah, blah, blah. Okay, no, they suddenly changed their mind on it. Everybody's shut. Come on, get out quickly, move. So things change so quickly. And one other thing I've realized, I was at a talk yesterday, a presentation, and a lot of Europeans and stuff who aren't anti-China and they go to China, they kind of like blown away by China and like how quickly things happen and how quickly things change there. And there's probably a lot of truth to it. And even with the analysis, when we're doing it, you just have to be extra careful. Everywhere, everything changes every day. But with China, it seems like every few years, there could have been a relatively important shift. Even with the president, apparently, someone's talking about suddenly starting 2016, 17, they started putting Communist Party maps and logos and everything in the universities, whereas before that, they wouldn't do that. So things seem to change like everywhere else, perhaps relatively at a fast pace.
No, I think things rapidly, I mean, that's the meaning of the word rapidly, but things are rapidly changing, as in they change at a faster rate, increasing. And you see that everywhere. But yeah, in places like China, Dubai, Singapore, where capital is like at its most mobile and most active, I think you see that more. But yeah, I think I mean, again, referencing my faves, Chapo Trap House, they talk about that. And for example, China might be where US was in 80s and 90s by 2050 or 2040 at like its height or zenith of its power and capitalism, and then by 2100 a downfall. Like I do think if even look at the longevity of empires, largely you see a trend towards a shorter term. So
yeah, I mean, if the US empire ends in, let's say, not ends, but its power is very diminished in the next 40 years or so, that would have been a pretty relatively short-lived empire. No, that would have made it like 140-year. I mean, I think the US had its first real foreign war, not taking into consideration Mexico and like the British, but
South
going
America.
abroad. Yeah, no, this is before South America. I believe is the Philippines in the early 1900s, and they had like a 2-year war with the Philippines. So maybe you can consider them as an. I don't know. I don't know if they were involved in South America.
Central America.
Yeah, even Central. But I mean, Central America, they were really involved in like 1950s onwards, no? For like 30, 40 years.
Well, I mean, they stole California from Mexico.
True. No, I was thinking, yeah. No, that is very true. And that's why I said put aside the Mexico War and all that. But, I'm talking about toppling like governments and regimes in like Guatemala and these kind of things. Sorry, I was distinguishing between them.
I would say the American global, let's say, empire really starts it kind of jumped. It has a tiny start after World War I with Wilson trying to do the League of Nations, but then Congress going, fuck you. And then after World War II, it really comes. So yeah, it's really after World War I, World War II. I mean,
so that's an interesting observation. But although perhaps the Chinese will be able to keep their number one position longer with more long-term planning. But we shall see.
They have certain geographical advantages.
Yeah,